Okay, welcome. In today's episode, we shall be looking at embryogenesis that occurs during the embryonic period. So the embryonic period is that period of development which occurs from week 3 to week 8 of development and is characterized by two basic things. One is termed organogenesis. Then the second one is morphogenesis. Then organogenesis. Organogenesis is development of different structures and organs from the three germ layers. And then morphogenesis is the attainment of the shape of the developing embryos. So for us to discuss or to go deep into this topic today, it's important for me to draw for you the basic structure of the three germ layers. But it's also important to note that during organogenesis is when most of the congenital anomalies actually arise. So when we draw our structure of the three germ layer, we shall start with the uppermost layer, which is the ectoderm or ectodermal layer. This is the ectoderm. Then the second layer is the mesoderm, and the innermost is the endoderm. So we have here, the middle here is the mesoderm, and then lastly here is the endoderm. Now in our discussion today, I'll be explaining the derivatives of what's actually ectodermal layer give rise to, and then the derivatives of the mesoderm. Then finally, we shall end with the derivative of the endoderm. So it's important to note that the ectodermal layer or the ectoderm normally divides or differentiates to form two parts. What causes that? Normally, after formation of notochord begin to produce growth factors which divides this ectodermal layer into two parts. The middle part, which we term as the neuroectoderm, and then the peripheral part, which we normally term as surface ectoderm. So what happens? What does the neuroectoderm give rise to? Neuroectoderm. The neuroectoderm normally give rise to three basic structures or derivatives. Number one is the neurotube. So we shall have neurotube formed by the neuroectoderm, and then this neurotube will eventually give rise to the central nervous system, which includes the brain and the spinal cord. Then the second thing that the neuroectoderm give rise to is what we term as the neurocrest cells. These neurocrest cells will give rise to structures such as ganglia. It will give rise to Schwann cells, the melanocyte, and many other structures. Then eventually, the third structure that neuroectoderm give rise to, we term as the placodes. The placodes, or the neuroplacodes. These neuroplacodes are of two types. One is olfactory placode, and then the otic placode. The olfactory placode will eventually give rise to the olfactory nerve, and then the otic placode will give rise to the vestibulocochlear nerve. Then the periphery of the ectoderm, which forms the surface ectoderm, also give rise to some structures. This is the surface ectoderm. So the surface ectoderm will differentiate and will give rise to all the body structures that is in direct interaction with the external world. This includes the epidermis of the skin and then the appendages of the skin. Another structure that is developed from the surface ectoderm will be the all the epithelial lining of the orifice of the body, the distal part, the distal epithelium of the anal canal. We shall talk about the epithelium that lines the buccal cavity, even the ears, and then the nasal cavity, and some other special senses like the ears and the nose is arising from the surface ectoderm. So let us now look at what happens from the mesodermal layer. Now, the mesodermal layer is also divided. Unlike the ectoderm, the mesodermal layer is divided into 3 different portions. One is that part of the mesoderm which is in close proximity with the neural tube. This is our neural tube. Then we have this part of the mesoderm which is in close proximity to the neural tube. So this part is termed as paraxial mesoderm. Paraxial mesoderm. And then we shall also look at what paraxial mesoderm actually gives rise to. Then the next part will be that particular part which is next to the paraxial mesoderm. And then this one is termed as the intermediate mesoderm. And then eventually we shall have the lateral plate mesoderm, which is at the extreme. This is the lateral plate. But it's important to note that this lateral plate is invaded by a cavity. So it has a cavity. Let me draw it. It has a cavity in it. And this cavity is termed as a coelom. A coelom. And because it's within the developing embryo, we call it intra-embryonic coelom. And then this coelom will divide the lateral plate mesoderm into 2. So we have this part which is closer to the ectoderm, and we term this part as somatic mesoderm. And then this other portion, which is closer to the endoderm, is termed as splanchnoid mesoderm. Now, these are the different portions which is arising from the mesodermal layer. So, for us to appreciate the derivatives of all these portions which is arising from the mesoderm, it is important that I draw for you a longitudinal view of these particular structures, which you'll be able to appreciate how the paraxial mesoderm leads to the formation of the somates, and then you will appreciate it after seeing that particular diagram. Now let us look at this structure in a longitudinal view. So we shall have here our neural tube. Then just adjacent to the neural tube will be the mesoderm, which I will term it the paraxial. That is actually the one which is closest to the mesoderm. This is our paraxial mesoderm. Now what happens is, this paraxial mesoderm undergoes segmentation to form segments, and those segments are termed somates. So what happens? This will segment from a somate, this segment from a somate, like that, like that, like that, like that, like that. So this is what we shall be having. Alright, now we have formed somates. And now this somate also further goes another division. So this is what happens in this somate. This will divide into 2. The part nearest to the neural tube, this will also divide into 2. Okay, now this part of the division that is nearest to the neural tube is termed scleroderm. Now, and it's this scleroderm that undergoes differentiation and moves around the neural tube. It differentiates and then it moves around the neural tube, and then it gives rise to the vertebral bones and discs. That is the scleroderm. Then this other portion, which is more lateral to the neural tube, it's termed as myodome. Then the dermatomyodome also divides into two. So the dermatomyodome will divide into two. This side also divides, that. Now, this other portion in the middle is termed as myodome. And then this myodome gives rise to the muscles of the trunk. Then these other aspects that is left, it forms dermatome. And the dermatome will give rise to the dermis of the skin. So now we have looked at what paraxial mesoderm will result into.
Done.
Okay, now we have already talked about paraxial mesoderm. The next is the intermediate mesoderm. Now the intermediate mesoderm will give rise to the urogenital structures, or the genitourinary structures will give rise to genitourinary structures. The ovaries, the testes, the kidneys, and the tubes. Then finally, we shall look at the lateral plate mesoderm. The lateral plate mesoderm has three components. One is the somatic mesoderm. The second one is the intra-embryonic coelom. Then the third one is the splanchno-pleuric mesoderm. Now we'll begin with the intra-embryonic coelom. The intra-embryonic coelom will give rise to the three major cavities of the body. That is the peritoneal cavity, the pleural cavity, and then the peritoneal cavity, the pleural cavity, and the pericardial cavity. That is from the intra-embryonic coelom. Then the somatic mesoderm. The somatic mesoderm will give rise to most of the muscles of the body wall and the limbs. Then it will also give rise to the connective tissues. Then lastly is the splanchno-pleuric mesoderm, which basically gives rise to the muscles of the visceral organs, and then other structures, and as well as the connective tissues that are found within such structures. Then the last part is the endoderm. The endoderm actually forms the epithelial lining of the whole structures within our bodies, and then the epithelial linings of the glands. Then it also gives rise to the primordial germ cell. Then the last part, which we are not going to dwell in so much, is the morphogenesis. This is as a result of the folding of the developing embryo. Thank you for attending. See you in the next episode.